Welcome to the Youth Ministry in the Vine podcast. I'm Kyle, pastor of family ministry at Old North Church in Canfield, Ohio, and author of Youth Ministry in the Vine, a ministry mind shift for discipling the next generation, published by Matthias Media. This podcast exists to equip youth pastors and volunteers to build biblical, sustainable, and contextual youth ministries. Here we are on another episode of Youth Ministry in the Vine, as you just heard in the introduction, but I do want to remind you, the podcast exists to equip youth pastors and volunteers, not just the youth pastors, but you as volunteers also, to build biblical, sustainable, and contextual youth ministries. I want to remind you that you can go to the show notes of this podcast episode, whether you're watching it or listening to it, and you can order the book, Youth Ministry in the Vine. That's published by Matthias Media, and it takes the conversation beyond being right here in the studio here with Sai today to what you can read and what you can read as a student ministry team. So Sai, good to be with you today.
I'm happy to be here.
Now, Sai, here we are in, again, the beautiful Bradford studio in Columbiana, Ohio, having this conversation. Now, this morning, we had our high school Bible studies as we normally do on the day that we're recording. But I know I had coffee this morning at that Bible study. I also know before our family ministry team meeting, was that the AeroPress you were using?
Yes. Oh, I've been a fan of the AeroPress for a while now, but I think the inventor himself went out to make a
He was a youth pastor?
Probably, based on his need for coffee. I don't know. But went to try and make something that could make the best cup of coffee, and I think he nailed it.
Maybe that's why you were locked in our family ministry team meeting.
Zoned. I was like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Ready. Such a good cup of coffee. But.
So no coffee here. We got water here in the studio. But I'm excited about this conversation that we're having because all of season 1 here of the Youth Ministry in the Vine podcast is just about welcoming our listeners and viewers to this framework, that's the word we're using, of youth ministry and the Vine, which came from a book that was published by Matthias Media, Trellis in the Vine. And so this podcast and the book Youth Ministry in the Vine kind of applying that framework to youth ministry. So all of season 1 is that. So tell us what we're talking about today.
We've done a lot of different things already between the framework and then the ingredients of youth ministry, teach, train, and time. We talked about parents, and today we're going to try and talk about a little bit bigger view, the scope of all of youth ministry, and really the levels of engagement that requires, and the different ministries and ways that we can minister to kids and what that looks like. So why is that important? Why is the whole view important? Why is this scope important for us to even consider?
Yeah, for me, recently, our ministry staff at Old North Church, we read another book that came out, again, published by Matthias Media, called the Team Leader Handbook. And it was a book, as we were reading it and thinking about it, there were certain things in there that were just maybe not new ideas to me, but were prompting me to think the why. Why are we doing the what? And one of the prayers that I think we've talked about on this podcast before, hanging in my office, kind of the prayer and the desire of my ministry is 4 words: every student, every school. And it's our desire that every student in every school would know the gospel. They're not all going to believe the gospel, but we want them to know the gospel. Right. And so if that's true, today's topic is so important as we think of the scope of the students that we have, because as we minister to students, we're going to minister differently to a kid who comes to an outreach event that we've never met before than a student who's been in church 3 times a week from the time they came out of the womb.
Yep,
right?
Very different.
And so the substance might not be different. We always want to have a youth ministry that's grounded in the Word of God, where we're articulating it in a way that's clear for teenagers. But it is going to feel different for the kid who only steps foot in a church Christmas Eve and Easter Sunday, as opposed to a kid who comes often. And then also, as we think about youth leaders, we also know that all of the youth leaders, even those who are watching this, and youth pastors, we're all in process too. And so we don't only have the scope of the variety of students that we're ministering to, but we're also, if we're leading ministries, having to strategically think about those who are volunteer youth leaders and how we're ministering to this variety. And the longer we do this in certain church settings, I mean, this is a complicated task that I'm growing, and I think you're growing too.
100%. I mean, it's something that's so easy that once you get on the grounds and doing ministry, it's easy to focus on the here and now and the urgent and the next step in the road, compared to taking a step back, making sure you're feeling the whole scope, seeing the why, and getting the purpose and the whole structure in mind as you get into the daily grind.
Yeah, and one of the things that crystallized in my mind over the past decade, I would say, is that we can be tempted in the youth ministry world to build programs that are awesome, or at least in our mind that we think are awesome. Right?
I think it's awesome.
Right. We can be tempted to build these awesome programs, and they can, look good in paper. We can make some cool Instagram reels inviting kids to come. All of that can happen. But if we don't do it with the actual students in mind, we can miss the target. Yeah. And just simply put, if we're going to plan an event differently, if we're planning for kids who are used to coming to church and those who are not, we're going to plan an event differently if it is one where we're teaching them a biblical message for understanding and learn how to apply, as opposed to a training event we might have where there's a very specific target. And so I think the key that we want to think about today is that we plan programs around people. And the people we have, this is why the third word here, we want to build biblical, sustainable, and contextual youth ministries. The people are individual to each church. The students we have in our church are different from the students of the churches that the pastors who have different churches that are watching this or listening to this today. And so as we work through these four categories, we're thinking, okay, what does this mean for us? What does it mean? And Sai, as we've been working through this over the past few years, I saw in you early on when you came to Old North, you didn't exactly have this language when you came, but you seem to have really latched onto it so quick.
Yeah, it gives you another framework, a scope of realizing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how everything gives a purpose. Because you don't know what you're aiming at, or you don't know what the wins are if you don't know what you're aiming at and what you're trying to go for. So a win for a particular student or particular event or a particular effort will look different depending on what your goal is and depending on who you're caring for. And so this give helpful language, helpful perspective. I'm a visual person, so it came with visuals, so that's helpful to have a whole graph and everything to mark it all out. So I love being able to plan and think that way. So I was able to easily attach on to this kind of language and what it does. So here's what I want to do. Can we go through these categories?
Let's go through them.
I'm going to read what you wrote.
Okay,
in the book, and then you just kind of respond. We'll go back and forth and kind of unpack each of these four words together.
Now, is there a different flavor of coffee for each of these?
Yes, we're going to actually have them all brought out as we go. We're going to do different tones and notes, starting with a higher acidity.
How do I order my coffee? Do I get a pumpkin spice latte?
Not fancy whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, if we were a couple, I'd be the fancier one getting the frou-frou drink, and you'd just be black coffee. And I like the funner.
One day you'll like black coffee.
Well, I do like black. That's the thing. It's all about the bean and what actually was the roast process. And this could be a whole other podcast.
Remember when we were at the Rooted conference? It would have been fall of 2025 in Chicago. And before the Rooted Student Ministry Conference started, we went to the Starbucks building there, and there were all the different.
How nice it was! I was surprised, and they had the cold brew out. It was samples.
I enjoyed
that was really
the
good.
Coffee, but also the dessert. But now we're getting off track. Okay, lead us here. Okay, so you're going to read something that I wrote in the book.
Coffee's a good distraction.
Yes. Okay.
And a good thing to get sidelined on. All right. So we're just going to go through. So first is engage.
Yep.
All right. And I'm just going to read your quote from the book.
Yep.
Here's what you say. You said, engage is about connecting with people who are not yet Christians and have never heard the gospel from you or your church. For example, imagine the local high school or middle school with 800 students. The target of engagement is the high percentage of those students who have never been to your youth group or church for any event. Some may not know any Christians at all. And when we interact with one of those students, we're engaging them and beginning a relationship that will hopefully be the first step to one day bringing them to Christ. The goal for engagement is to not take students from other healthy churches, but to seek and create opportunities to interact with those who don't know Jesus. So Kyle, who are these students? How should we view them? Why does this matter on helping us look at the whole scope?
Yeah, this is crucial because oftentimes when we think of events, again, this is why we form programs and events around people, not the other way around, because what we want to do is we want to be shooting for the target of those we don't yet know. Again, very strategic. We're not trying to steal kids from other healthy churches, right? We realize that God's plan A is healthy churches, healthy local churches, and it takes a lot of local churches to pull this off, right? To evangelize and establish an area. But when we think about youth ministry specifically, engagement would be think through the schools in your area, the teenagers in your area, and who are these people? I mean, the word is very clear that you haven't engaged with yet. So these are not the current students you have. This is, let's look outside the four walls of our church. Now, in our context, we got a lot of churches represented. In my office, I have pictures of most of those high schools. It's a good visual. My wife and I, we drove around and took pictures of all the high schools there on the wall. Really cool but we realized that some churches might have one or two schools. And in some ways that can be easier to narrow the circle in. But engagement would be, as we plan these programs, which might be event driven, who is the target audience if we're looking for engagement? And those would be the kids that we haven't yet met.
Yeah. I feel like it's so easy to fall on one extreme or the other as a youth ministry when it comes to engagement. We either put too much resources and time and effort into making this happen because we know, hey, well, if we don't engage other people, then the church doesn't grow. We aren't making disciples, right? That's at the core of all of this.
Yes.
And so there's that almost a pressure and an unhealthy sense that gets pushed so far that there's too much put into that, to the neglect of other ministry efforts and other discipleship and caring. That's one extreme.
Right.
Then the other extreme is whether it's because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, or it's difficult, or the context we're in, whatever it is, we just do nothing. Yeah.
And this morning, I was praying with a few students before school at one of our student-led Bible studies at a Christian school. And some of the students in our church they went with a Christian high school on a mission trip to South America. And when we think of mission trips, it can be easy to think of engagement because we've never engaged these people before, right? Those are the people we're engaging. I think it's harder for us to think about what does engagement look like now. And so for those who are watching or listening, you can just imagine maybe showing up at a football game in the fall at the local high school or a basketball game in the winter and just looking at the student section, whether it's a small student section or a large student section, and then expanding to the players on the field, the cheerleaders, in the band. These are the students who you want to start praying for, that you can engage them with the gospel. I know, Sai, in our setting, as we think of engagement, one way that we get time with kids we normally can't engage is we sponsor meals for athletic teams at our local high school. Now, again, this is contextual for us. The booster club of these teams are looking for people to sponsor the meals. We plan ahead and budget money so that we have it for this. And what happens is when it's our time to do the meal, we have an opportunity to show up, maybe to pray, but at the very least to interact with these students and leaders. And now what happens is they go from being people out there to people who we've now engaged with. And what this does is it reminds us the proximity to the church building is not what we're looking for. In this setting, it's not like you're engaged once you go from the street to the parking lot, to the sidewalk, to the foyer, into the gym. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the people of God actually interacting with these students. And the key is we're not looking for people to do anything creepy either. Like, don't show up at the school and knock on the door and walk in and be like what is appropriate? Yeah. Like, it's appropriate to go to sporting events and to be there and for people to realize you're the pastor. It's appropriate to sponsor a meal. And now what happens? Now I'm interacting, and I'm Pastor Kyle. I'm from Old North Church. We're so happy. Like, our people at our church are so happy to provide this meal for you today. And what I've learned is if you do that over time, this engagement is crucial because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I'm not ready to move there yet. Okay. But like, what I want to do is I want to give them the gospel. Yeah. But it's impossible to give the gospel to people you don't interact with.
Right. You need that relationship there in the first place.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so tricky, depending on our context, depending on your relationship with local schools. That can be so much harder depending on where you're in.
Yeah, and I think regionally, that's very different. I was looking at a study about in the youth ministry world, and the people in the study, they put the statistics, and it was like most of the studies were in the Southeast. And I'm like, well, that's really helpful for those who are in the Southeast, but that's very different from a friend of ours who's up in the Northeast. And it's like, it was just very different contextually what that looks like. So I think the key for engagement is before we think about the message that we're going to share, before we think about, okay, now I want them to come to this, even Christianity Explored type study, or, we've done something before where it's like, hey, come meet us at a coffee shop. And if you have any questions about God, come. Before you get to any of that, first we have to actually interact with the students, which brings me to a question I have for you, Sai, and that is, why do you think it's easy for us to kind of blow past thinking strategically about engagement and just blow quickly into, now I need to share them the gospel?
Yeah. Well, when we think of youth ministry, we don't usually think of engage.
Yep.
If anything, if we had the opportunity to go to some Bible college or seminary, we think of the Bible teaching. We think of the training in godliness and spiritual things. We don't necessarily have too much training on the other end.
Yes.
And there's so many more churches and movements that are growing ministry workers in that area, but it's not usually our default. And so it takes a little bit extra, it takes a little bit more effort on our own to make that intentional engagement opportunity. And so you mentioned a couple things here. Connecting with the Boost Club or some other support in that way. I'm thinking of the youth worker listening. It's like, okay, I'm at 0. I've gotten maybe at a new context, maybe like, well, this is something I need to work on or growing. Or hey, what are some specific ideas? Obviously, prayer is the very first thing, as you mentioned.
And I think prayer in a way where we're actually praying specifically for not like landmarks, like, oh, I'm going to pray for like the center of our town. But what would it look like to say, each day this week that I'm in my office, I'm going to pull out my phone, I'm going to put a 5-minute timer, and I'm going to pray for the local high school. And then the next day, or all the local high schools. And the next day I'm going to pray for all the local middle schoolers. And then and so I think prayer is key. Something else, and just to say, if you didn't listen to the previous or watch the previous episode where we talked about the ingredients of a youth ministry, teach, train, and time. It's episode number 2. This is where we cannot undervalue time. I think engagement is time. And the example I have is yesterday. I live about 8 minutes from our church. That's close enough where I'm close, and not close enough where, like, if someone needs a key, they're like, my previous church, I was like a third of a mile, and it was like, can you bring a key over here right now? Right? But close enough to our church, and the high school is in between my house and our church. And I go for a run yesterday, and a student, I hear PK, like they're yelling like out the window. And it's a student who I first met at an outreach event and then started coming to our Sunday school and to our church. And when I think about this is where time is important, because I engaged him when I interacted with him at the outreach event. But as I'm just living my normal life, this is giving me more engagement. Now, he moved beyond that, but I think about other kids who, last fall, this happens a lot. I go for a run. Afterwards, I'm cooling
Running
down.
Seems to be a theme here.
I think so good when I run.
Maybe more youth pastors just need to go on runs.
Caffeine and running. Okay. And one of the captains of the football team, pizza delivery man, a boy drives by, waves to me. That's an engagement, right? He doesn't come to my church. He knows me from other from other things. So when we think about that, I think prayer. I think thinking about, what does it look like for me one day a week, if kids get out of school around 2:30, to, instead of staying in my office all afternoon, and instead going and working at a local coffee shop that kids might stop at after school. I was at a coffee shop for another Bible study for a local high school yesterday. We were at highly caffeinated. We were at Starbucks. And I got there early to kind of stake out our claim of where we're going to do the Bible study. And it's amazing. School, it must be like a sliding scale of when it lets out. But students are just coming and buying coffee. And I'm thinking, if I had we have a lot of schools, so I target the one closest to our church building. But I'm like, if I lived in this area and if our church mainly was going after this school, I'd work in this Starbucks 2 or 3 afternoons a week. Yeah. Again, not to be like, this is one way you don't have to worry about like, why is a youth pastor talking? Like, just get there and like kids like to talk, right? Mm-hmm. And so, number 1, pray. Number 2, think about how time kind of can play into this, where you're actually positioning yourself. And then 3rd, again, knowing the people you're targeting, planning events and programs that can best engage with them. When I started in youth ministry, Palmyra High School, Palmyra, Pennsylvania, a good friend of mine, Steve Mann, he wasn't my friend yet, sent him an email. Hey, we're both in the same area. We did a tailgate for kids before football games. Mm-hmm. We're like, all the kids are coming to the football games. They're hungry. They're going to spend a lot of money anyways in the concession stand. Let's just like feed them beforehand and have like, what did that do? It gave us an engagement. Did we get to the gospel? No. Would have I liked to get to the gospel? Yes. Would some people look at an event like this as a failure because you didn't get to the gospel? Possibly. But in that sense, the purpose of that tailgate before the game was not to present the gospel. It was to engage with students so that eventually we can move on to the next ones.
Yeah, Kyle, I've seen you execute this so well. And I think a lot of it comes down to the who and where they're at and what you can try to do with them, whether they're already having families that are in the community. Talk with those families that are in your church that are in the community. And then you get to work through them. And then it's not this weird youth pastor on his own showing up. It's like, well, no, I'm supporting our families in these different contexts, come alongside what they're already doing. Hearing from them, talking to them, being involved in the school in some way of maybe there's some type of club, but also there's opportunities there for open doors, and even just serving the school and bringing donuts on the first day of school to the staff, or just any other ways that you can serve the school so they see you as a trustworthy and trusted presence to say, hey, we trust them. That just you're building that trust over time. And I've seen you do this where, and this is where the contextual part is important. Many youth groups have done and have heard of the 5th quarter idea where it's after the football game.
Right.
But this is something you tweaked it and made work, because that doesn't work in every context.
Correct.
But how did you shift that and use that as an engaged thing that has opened doors to so many other opportunities for us, even in our context?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if you're watching or listening to this, the next episode, we actually talked to 2 kids who, they're not kids anymore, but they came as unbelieving kids in high school. And now God saved them and they're serving in this 5th quarter ministry. One way we tweak this is, again, because we're forming programs around people. And so in our context, this sounds so cliche, but it's so true, is we were serving these kids at our local high school, and we were serving food that I would have liked to eat, that you would have liked to eat. And I just realized we have a budget for this event. Kids love Chick-fil-A. This was 10 years ago. I'm like, kids love Chick-fil-A. Like let's buy them Chick-fil-A. Again, not as a bait and switch. Some people will say we shouldn't do it. I look at it as we want to do things with excellence. And rather than giving hot dogs, I love hot dogs. Rather than giving hot dogs,
you can put on
let's do Chick-fil-A and let's see what happens if we serve them with excellence. Maybe we'll get more of the kids we want, because I wanted the kids from that one specific high school. And what happened is more of those kids came. Then what happened is I'm like, you know what? These kids want to do something fun after the game. Let's have a dodgeball tournament. All of a sudden, they're coming and they're eating Chick-fil-A and they're playing dodgeball. As those numbers kept growing, then we were able to tweak, which I guess we can switch, like the actual make sure evangelism is happening. So again, let's not forget that if we want to get to evangelism, you could just show up at the school and start evangelizing kids. There'd be nothing wrong with that. But if we can think strategically in this youth ministry in the Vine mindset and think, how are we engaging? It can actually flow into the event. Is this a good time to move to the
time? You just teed it up so well.
Well, you were leading me there. I'm ready to go. That's my favorite. Okay,
read for me nothing else. Let's just we can spend forever.
Read for me the Evangelize.
We've got engaged. That's the first step. Next, we have Evangelize. Let me read what you have there. Just a little snippet. Engaging students and getting them into your building and programs is good, but it's not enough. At some point, they each need to hear the gospel clearly spoken. So the second E is evangelizing those you have engaged.
Yeah.
Okay, who's this? Who are we talking about? Why is this important? Why does this matter? Because as you were just starting to say, we don't want to leave them at engaged, right?
Correct. It's not a failure to engage kids and maybe you never see them again, or maybe they don't like. That's not a failure, because I mean, this is like the New Testament. The New Testament explains that like it's like the fragrance of Christ, right? We're representing Christ in a dark world. But it's really sad if we engage kids and we never clearly explain the gospel to them. And as you know, to use the example of this fifth quarter outreach, we're planning programs and events around people. Once we were able to get the students in the room who I wanted, which was one high school. I love all the high schools in the area, but I wanted one high school. And part of it is I realized if I can make this the thing that kids want to come to after the game, then more of them will want to come. And so we stopped inviting other high schools, caused some tension. I remember going to Dairy Queen one night and a student was like, "Hey, Pastor Kyle, I don't go to that high school. Can I come to fifth quarter?" And I was like, it's not for you. Yeah. I'm like, we do a ton of events for you.
There's some people that aren't, you're not allowed, it's not a full open thing. Isn't Jesus for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, those are the things. And I had to hold the line. And so now that we had the students in the building, now it was, I don't just want them to be in the building. I want to clearly explain the gospel to them. And honestly, for those who are watching or listening, I want to just encourage you to evangelize well might take time. Olivia, who worked with me for many years as our student ministry coordinator, we struggled to figure out the best way to explain the gospel in this fifth quarter outreach event, because kids weren't coming to church to hear the gospel. They were coming to church after the game to have fun, to eat a good meal. And that's where some people would say, "Okay, Kyle, you bait and switch them. They're just coming for that. They're not coming to hear the gospel." But I believe the gospel is powerful enough to save students who come into church for the wrong motives. Like, I believe, and I've seen it with my eyes now. I've seen students, like, I mean, I remember, like, I get goosebumps talking about this. Oh, I love this. Like, because I can't take credit for it. I remember, like, I stand at the door and welcome kids when they come after, like, football game's over, they come in dozens at a time in. And a girl literally says, I'd never be caught dead walking into a church building. And you know what happens? In she comes, right? Like, and so I want to explain the gospel, and I encourage those who are watching this or listening to this. It's taken me 10 years to fine tune how we speak the gospel. I've tried different things. One time we tried, we were like, you know what? They don't want to listen to me. Let's show a 3-minute video. It was the most awkward 3 minutes of my youth ministry life, because we showed a video of the gospel, and we build it up. Now we're going to show and they just all talk to each other. And it's like, but now what I don't get is, like, and those who are watching or listening, it's an act of God. For some reason, our local high school students, they love me. And like, I'm pretty boring.
Not a knock on Kyle, but he doesn't, you don't look at him and think, wow, he should be my friend.
I'm not like, it's
probably
not
because
like
you're so tall.
Well, it's not like, I always say, like, oh man, it's not like I was the quarterback at this local high school 15 years ago and I'm in the Hall of Fame.
But they see you're there, you're present, and you're genuine and you care. You're not clearly trying to entertain them.
Yeah, I think genuine is right. I think the students know that I'm genuine. And the reason I can say this, and it's not bragging, is it's an act of God.
Yeah.
Right. Standing there in front of 225 students who are public school kids, and I say, "Hey, tonight, I just need your attention for 90 seconds. I want to tell you something that could change your life," or some variation of that. And they get quiet, and the Lord is using his word to change people. And so this is where, whether it's an event like that, like fifth quarter, whether it's kids now who are engaged, meaning you know them, and they come week after week after week, but they're not yet Christians. This engagement and evangelism section, as we think about the whole realm of the students, these are any kids that are not yet Christians. So if you're teaching a Sunday school class, I was just looking at a picture of some of my first ever youth groups when I was just an intern.
Oh, I think you sent me the picture. I was like,
this,
what?
I see this, let's say there's 12 kids there. That might even be a high number. 12 kids in Sunday school. If 7 of them are Christians and 5 of them are not, I'm trying to now evangelize those 5. Now, Sai, since we've started doing this podcast, I feel like this idea of a Venn diagram has really like blown up in my life. But this is where, when we're evangelizing kids in our weekly youth ministry, kids who come in who aren't Christians, what we're actually doing is we're evangelizing them, but we're also training the students who already are Christians on how to evangelize their friends and family who aren't yet Christians. How do we do that? It's not like we'd say, okay, raise your hand if you're not a Christian. I want to but what it means is, as we clearly articulate the gospel in our weekly programming, and we should be, because there's very good odds there's students sitting there who aren't yet Christians. We're now giving a language to those who already are Christians on how they can articulate. Because what we know, and this is where Greg Steer from Dare to Share has been super helpful, like, what we need is multiplication. What we need is not one youth pastor to just be, telling the gospel. We need to be training up an army of students who are going to go out and share the gospel, because you know what? They interact with the people more than we do. Right? And they're going to listen to their friends share the gospel in a unique way, differently. And that's where in our setting, in North America, it can be normal to say, you know what, I'm going to invite my friend to church, and I bring my friend to church, and then I'll have the youth pastor explain the gospel to them. But when we think of evangelism, that is evangelism. That as the youth pastor, I'm sharing the gospel to the unsaved friend who comes and is sitting in Sunday school or sitting in youth group or sitting at the event. But you know what also is evangelism? It's training the student who comes weekly to go share the gospel at the lunch table, to share the gospel after soccer practice, to share the gospel when they're in a car driving. Here locally, we have Handel's ice cream. Like, while they're driving to Handel's after school or after practice, say, you know what? Like, it's Christmas or it's Easter or whatever. Like, and looking for bridges to get to the gospel.
So we're only 2 in. Engage, evangelize, and we're starting to see how really it's not just one straight line. There's some overlapping.
So that's the Venn diagram. There's some overlap.
Where it's not only the kids that are in it and the kids we're trying to bring through it, but also where the next kid is and where they kind of ebb and flow. But what's unique about this stage, as you kind of said, how do we know they're moving from engage? There's a clear articulation of the gospel. And so can we maybe double tap on this a little bit more of like, okay, well, if this is something we realize, hey, how do I know if I'm doing this? Or how do I know as a youth worker, should I do more of this? So it could be every week in youth time that you're clearly expressing and articulating the gospel. It could be at these one-off events. Are there some other areas, and what all are we looking for? Just specific articulations? Just simple enough of Jesus loves you? Like, what all are we trying to do here? And is there a length of time? How long does someone stay in this kind of realm? Well,
so someone would stay in this realm until they put their faith in Christ. Right?
Which could be, they say what? Up to 20 times someone hears the gospel till they actually believe in it. So time is okay, right? And someone will be in this.
Could be a long time, and they're going to stay before they move to the next stage. They could be here forever if they never believe. And so what we need to think about is, first off, how we're articulating the gospel. Second, if you're a youth leader, not the youth pastor or the main youth leader, but you're the youth leader serving in a church setting, I want to let you know that you might even have a more specific responsibility at youth ministry, because kids might hear it from the main speaker who's teaching or preaching that night, but interpersonally afterwards, they might hear the gospel from a different angle out of the lips of a youth leader, and it might connect with them. Because what I found is we need to have the youth pastor or the main person who's locked in and has their language. I think we need to have youth leaders who have shared youth language over sharing the gospel, but then we also need the students to understand that language too. We've used the tool a lot in our setting, 2 Ways to Live. Matthias put out a book called The Christian Gospel. Crossway has a book that we use, What is the Gospel by Greg Gilbert. There's all kinds of variety of resources out there, but we want to make sure that we have a shared language. And whatever that shared, like some churches have, different taglines or whatever. But we want to make sure that we are sharing it. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not looking for addition, we're looking for multiplication. Yeah. So for me, if I can say, hey, bring a friend to youth group, I'm going to share the gospel tonight. That would be addition. Mm-hmm. One kid brings one friend. That's awesome. Yeah. Multiplication is I train a kid how to share the gospel. And now this week, he's sharing the gospel with different friends. The win in youth ministry is that can happen now, but if we train them well now, they might do it for the next 50 years.
Talk about multiplication.
That's multiplication. And it
starts with that shared language.
And you can't measure that.
No, and that's one of those where it's not always about measuring.
Yes.
Right? But it's still this faithfulness and genuineness of what we're trying to do and be faithful.
Yes.
We've got God's place in front of us. And that shared language is so helpful because if we zoom into our kids' lives and listen to the voices and what they say in return, even just asking your own kids, hey, what would you say the gospel is?
Yes.
Or how would you explain it? There's actually so many weeds of false gospels within sometimes their explanations, not even intentionally. Some of it's just because they hear so much or there's so many slight changes in how we articulate certain things about Jesus and about God's word and about what God does in the world that actually is really important to be super clear what it is, the good news that we're sharing.
And we gotta move on to the next one. But first, it's worth pausing and encouraging those who are watching or listening to say, so often we think we're explaining the gospel, but really we're just brushing up against it. That's what Marty, who was on the first episode with us, we think that we're explaining the gospel, but we might just explain an angle of it, or it's worth it if the gospel really is good news. Mm-hmm. And we know, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God to save everyone who, the gospel can save anyone who believes. If that's true, it's worth explaining it. And I've grown in my conviction that if it's not about me being cool, and it's not, and if it's not about having the most awesome event, and I think we pull off some pretty cool events, but if it's not about that and it's not, that if I'm going to explain the gospel to a teenager, it's worth taking the time to do it because God might use it this very moment to save their soul.
Yeah. And that's just one step of the process, right? So we've got engage.
Yep.
We've got evangelize.
Yes.
And then now the middle line as we cross into establish.
Yeah. And so just to remind those who are watching or listening, you can go to the show notes, purchase the book. In the book, there's an arrow that kind of shows left side.
Like me some graphics.
Yes. Engage, evangelize. And then once you become a Christian, which again, only God knows. There's a lot of teenagers who have false professions of faith. They think they're Christians and they're probably not. All of that. But once they're a Christian, that's where they move out of the domain of darkness and into the kingdom of God's Son, which is Jesus. And this is where establishment takes place.
Yes. Let me read what you said, and then we'll continue to unpack it. So establish, as you said, describes the process of growth for those who, upon being evangelized, have repented of their sin, put their faith and trust in Christ, and begun following him as his disciples. In moving from evangelize to establish, the student moves through the cross in the center of our arrow, right? Representing that they have been, as you just said, transferred the dominion of darkness and into the kingdom of the Son. God is the one who saves according to his time and plan. So it's crucial for youth workers to remember that God is the one who gets all the credit and glory when a person moves from being evangelized to being ready to be established in their new faith. Establishing is the growth phase of discipleship, where students go from being baby Christians to being mature Christians who can be equipped, which is our fourth E, and we'll get there in a little bit. But let's talk about establish. Who are we talking about here? How should we view them?
Yes.
And what's at stake?
So the key here is establish is the growth phase. Now, at the time of this recording, we both have daughters who are in elementary school. We both have daughters that I think enjoy having dolls or some type of stuffed animal, or, in our case, unicorns, Okay. So one thing that we think about the growth phase is if we're going to teach kids the gospel, students the gospel, we need to teach them in a way that they're actually going to be understanding. Now, that doesn't mean water down the gospel, but I do think, as some preaching advice I heard one time is don't be simple, be clear. I think similarly, when we think of establishing, we need to be clear with what we're doing and how we're articulating it. Now, my daughter likes to teach her stuffed animals whatever she learns in elementary school, and like I'm tucking her in at night, and I go up to her room, and on her little easel, she's like teaching them the vowels the other day, A, E, I, O, and U.
She doesn't end up as a teacher.
Yeah, right. I walk upstairs, and she's teaching these stuffed animals how to count by three.
I might need to attend some of her classes.
So that's happening now in elementary school. If we were to fast forward and she's in high school, and because what she's doing is what I'm learning at school, I'm now teaching my stuffed animals. If we were to move forward to her in high school and she's still teaching those same things, that'd be weird because she's not going to be learning that anymore, right? Like I don't know in the years ahead if she's going to be teaching calculus or not. So but the reason I say that is when we think of students, whether they're in middle school or high school, or with our family ministry team, even when we think of children who are in elementary school, the growth phase is important because we're teaching them what they need at this phase, hoping that then they will be able to build and grow. I mean, that's the idea of growth, right? You don't end up where you are now. And so, like what that quote said, that once they're evangelized, once they've put their faith in Christ, establishing is a growth phase of discipleship where students go from being baby Christians to being mature Christians who can then be equipped. And so with that, what we're looking to do is, as we mentioned in episode 2, teach, train, and time, the ultimate goal is not only information transfer.
Right.
Of course, teaching, we want information transfer.
Yes, that's part of
we want these established kids to understand the Bible, but they're not understanding the Bible just to win Bible trivia.
Right.
They're not understanding and knowing the Bible just so that they could take a test and know all the kings of Israel. That's important, but not ultimate. And so what we're thinking here in establishment is, again, and we're forming the programs around the people. So as we're thinking of Sunday school, as we're thinking of summer camp, as we're thinking of whatever program, you could make a long list, let's think about how are we growing the actual people we have. This looks differently. Some kids are really smart. If you're watching this or listening to this, you might have really smart kids in your youth group, and that's a challenge to teach sometimes, right? There might be other kids. One of my favorite students in our youth group right now is a student who he's at a technical school, and he might not be as book smart as others, but he's one of our greatest evangelists we have. Like I was just talking to other adults today who was like, hey, he's inviting these kids, and so with that, like the goal is to meet kids where they're at, to teach them the Word of God, and knowing that growth is happening. Now, biblically, we know Paul, he says you're not going to, or even just the idea in our culture today, like you're not going to eat baby food forever, right? Eventually, your appetite's going to change. What you eat is going to change. Your body's going to get bigger. But when we think of this in the church, we want to give people a healthy diet. I think when we think of, we're thinking, I just had some jelly beans in your office before we came here. Over that thing out there. But we want to give them a healthy diet of Bible teaching. So that they can grow. This is the growth phase. And again, it's going to look different for a 6th grade boy than it might for a 10th grade girl. It's going to look different for a kid who is academically smart and someone who likes to work with their hands. All of this might look different, but the key is, what are the needs currently in your youth ministry? I think so often in the youth ministry world, we make a mistake by just, this is the program we're doing, and hope that people come. And the heartbeat behind the book and this podcast and what we do every day at our church is we want to form the programs around the people. That doesn't mean every day we change the program. Something that has to be like, this year, this is what we're doing. But we just, I don't want to overemphasize, but this is what Jesus did. Jesus handled the people differently depending where he was. And so, I don't know. So how have you seen this establishment as we're trying to grow students. How have you seen this with students?
And that's where it does really matter where they're at. And you have to be listening to your students. You have to be knowing where they're at. And that can be tricky.
Yep.
And we just actually did something this past weekend where we did a little survey at the end of a series that was super helpful. But even just kind of hearing their response on one of the areas they may struggle in. And one of the things that kept coming back regularly was one of the questions, hey, are you a quicker forgiver?
Yes.
And so many of the students were like, no, that's what I struggle with. And so if that's clearly a theme that so many of our kids are saying they struggle with, then we should probably, to help establish them, say, hey, this is clear, at least a weakness that they see in their life, regardless of how accurate, they at least see it.
Yes.
And so to be able to say, hey, maybe we should lean into that to establish them in this area of weakness or area that we want to see them grow.
And so what I hear you say, super helpful, even as I think about how I serve our students also, is next year, as the students are a year older, new students in, other students move to the area, that specific category might not be the same answer.
True. It could be different. Every group of kids is different, right? And that's where each kid is different.
Yeah.
And even if one kid says they struggle with forgiving and another one says they also struggle with forgiving, there could still be very different struggles on why they struggle with forgiving someone.
You don't know my sister. You're like, oh, yeah.
It could be a sibling.
She's up in high school now.
And as we even know with their own forgiveness, right? That could still be a struggle with their understanding of sin, their understanding of being saved by Christ, their own understanding of the gospel itself. So it could all still come from different angles and different directions. It's about knowing your students, knowing where they're at, to then take them where they need to go.
And as we do this is where it's important to think, okay, engage, evangelize, establish. This is where a lot of times, I think, when I think of our Sunday school, we're doing a lot of establishing and evangelizing because we got a lot of kids who likely come who aren't Christians yet.
Yep.
But if we were to kind of pull back and go back, rewind to where we just were talking about outreach events, this is where the language we use teaching is going to be different at an outreach event where most of the kids who are coming are probably not Christians, different than a Sunday school where even if there are kids who aren't Christians, they're expecting to hear this, right? The language, the way we explain things is going to be different. And this is where I think thinking about the scope of all this and forming programs around people is helpful, because if we only get so many times to teach kids, to present the gospel to kids, we want to do it in a way that's not going to be an hindrance.
Yeah.
That's not going to be like a roadblock. And so this is where I think recently in our youth ministry setting, I taught through Psalm 23. I think that a lot of the lessons might have been helpful, but I probably articulated things differently there than I would if the football coach called me up to come give us, a little speech and a prayer before the game. You always think like, oh, David and Goliath, but like, no, don't do it. But the point being, it's good to know who we're presenting things to so that we can do it in a way that actually makes sense.
So with this phase, and I don't want to get to the next one yet, and so maybe we can start to wrap it up here, but I still want to, if we look at our students, it's sometimes hard to read and understand and to notice the fruit of their lives, to know the genuineness, especially if their context is growing up in the church and they know a lot of the right answers, can say a lot of the right answers. But we want to actually know where they're at. It's hard to get a read. So how do we know if someone's been in this stage for too long? How do we encourage them towards the next step? And we can maybe eventually get there. But how do we wrestle with that tension as youth workers to read our kids accurately, to assess them? Should we not even bother with that at all? Like, what level and depth is that an actual responsibility of ours? And how can we challenge and encourage them if we notice some stagnation?
Yeah, stagnation. I feel that in my own heart a lot. I think a few things come to mind. Number one, we need to make sure that we're not only the ones who are always talking, but we have to be listening to the kids. It's a lot easier to run a youth ministry where we do most of the talking because we're not hearing what's actually being processed in the heart of the students. And so first we need to actually listen to the students. Second, previous episode we have to listen to the parents. We have to lean on the parents in this. Now, again, we're parents of children. Parents don't know everything about the kids.
Right.
We all know. Those who are listening and watching, volunteer or youth pastor, some parents think their kid is like, this Christian role model. Like, oh, well, come look, right? Like, But listen to the parents, knowing that the parents have known the kid and love the kid longer than you have, and listen to what they think. I think also making sure we're teaching in a way that students know that there has to come a time where they go from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of God's Son. Now, I personally, in this season, lean away from doing like altar call type things. Some people watching this might do them often. We're not here to talk about right or wrong in that sense. Yeah. What I'm here to say is the way we articulate that even if we don't know exactly when a kid goes from not being saved to being saved, they have to make that switch at some point. Yeah. And so just articulating that so that they realize, have I made that switch? Or, I thought I made that switch. Or, I prayed a prayer when I was a kid, but did I really mean it then? And that can launch into better conversations. And this is where I would just encourage youth ministry happens well in the youth room. Youth ministry grows in different settings. Take a kid to a coffee shop. The nice thing is, at our church, we so careful to follow protocols where like take a kid to a public place like a coffee shop where you don't have to worry about being one-on-one with the kid, and have a buy them coffee and have a good conversation. Or if it's a middle schooler, I think about when you meet with, 2, 3, 4 boys and they walk past my office on a Thursday morning, they're homeschooled. You meet with them. They shoot me with Nerf guns as they walk by, all that happening. Like that's a different setting than a normal youth group. And that's where, again, like we talked about, teaching normally, not always, one person talking, kids in rows, training, which we'll get to with equipping, circles. But this is where getting out of the rows and into circles across each other, but again, that requires listening, and listening is hard. It's a lot easier just to tell information rather than processing the information.
One of my middle schoolers this weekend, even as we were talking about these spiritual questions and diagnostic thing that we went through, which was super helpful and good to just see them processing in real time. I told them exactly this, that hey, it's not as important to figure out the exact moment, just like you're sitting in this chair right now. You don't you remember the exact time you sat down? Probably not. Maybe you could figure out, you get close, get a couple minutes off to get the exact time. But what's less important is the exact time that you sat in the chair and the fact that you are sitting in that chair. That right now you're trusting in that chair to hold you up and to keep you sitting.
That's exactly right.
Same way, it's less important to figure out the exact moment that you trusted in Christ and the fact that you are trusting him right now. Regardless of where your past has been, what's important is that today you're sitting in the chair of Christ, trusting him for salvation. And to help our kids see that and understand that, that's a key part of the goal as we try to all establish them. Yeah. With our time left, can we move right into the last one here? Give it enough time.
Let me say one thing, and then we need to jump. So when we think of establishment, if you're watching this and you're a volunteer youth leader, I wonder where you're at in this establishment phase. Some of us might be newer Christians. And so, we might feel like, I'm not sure if I can really communicate these things deeply. Well, that's oftentimes why, if available, you're partnered with someone who's been following Jesus longer so that you can grow at both internally, I'm growing, but now I'm also leading kids along the way. And so I would even challenge those who are watching or listening who are youth pastors to think, where would I put my youth leaders on this? And again, the goal is not to have this perfect scale and this person prays 4 times a day. So they're no, the goal is that we're all growing, and then where we're getting to the equip. So why don't you read the equip one?
Let's dive right in, because this connects right into it, and we can talk more about this as we go. But so equip is the last D. We go from engage, evangelize, establish, and now equip. And there's a difference here, and this will be helpful to articulate and tease this out. So here's what you wrote. As students grow in maturity in the established phase, the goal is to have them also become equipped to grow others as well. That's the shift. Growth in maturity includes growing in love for God and love for others. Thus, a noticeable fruit in the life of a student who is maturing, that their focus shifts from being on themselves to focusing on others. And there's more you talk about this but that's the shift, right? Yes. That it goes from not just myself, my own growth, but also, where's everybody else on this spectrum?
Not only inward focus, but outward focus.
Yeah, so help us unpack this a little bit more. Tie maybe back into what you were saying there a little bit.
So when we think about students, we want to, again, if you buy the book, look in the arrow, it'll show us, engage, evangelize, establish. Now that we're equipped, if we're doing the equipping well, what we're doing is we're sending them back to do the engaging and the evangelizing. This is the multiplication factor. This is, if I can equip the students in my youth group to know how to articulate the gospel, they're able to share the gospel with their friends. Now, when we think about this, I've read about this in the book too. Like, what in the world does it mean for a high school or middle school student to be other people centered?
Yeah.
Like, I was thrilled a couple weeks ago. New student comes to the youth group, and one of my key students walked her into the room, asked her friends, "Can everyone move down a seat?" Which sounds simple, but we know, like, that's
Big
like,
deal.
can everyone move down a seat? And then she had the new student sit with her in her row. That's being other people centered. Now, in one sense, I think she was probably equipped to have that moment because as she was established, she realized, now I need to be other people centered. But I do think we can have equipping in our teaching. We can we can equip. I had to do something so simple the other week. I used to hope that, like, I mean, I still hope there's no cliques in the youth group, but I used to emphasize that more. And now sometimes I get to the point where I'm like, I'm happy that kids can come and be with their friends in a healthy, safe setting at church. So sometimes they might be more divided than I'd hope they are. But literally last week I had to be like, okay, guys, I promise I'll never do this again, which probably wasn't actually a good promise. But I said, hey, why don't you pair up with someone you're friends with? And so now we have all these pairs. And I said, now I want you to go find people in the room who you normally don't talk to. And so I started giving them examples. And I'm like, hey, you in the front. I never see you talk to her. And so I started saying their names. And it's funny because these kids have been in church together for years, like nursery, elementary school, middle school, and like, I never see them talk. So I said, this is the type. And so what we're doing is we're in that moment we're equipping. Other ways equipment. This is where mission trips and camp can be so good. Like we don't go on mission trips currently in our high school ministry for multiple reasons. But one reason is we go to camp so we can all do the same thing rather than like multiple mission trip. But like what I started doing is I built in equipping times in camp where, you know what, we might not be serving others, but how can we be equipped with tools so that when we go back from camp, you know, the 1 week away, I think David Platt says the 1 week away to influence the 51 other weeks, that now when I go back, now I'm equipped with tools on how to share my faith, on how to view youth group, go on mission trips. When you go on mission trips, kids love to explain the gospel to little kids on mission trips. What they don't realize is there are dozens of kids in their own church who don't know the gospel. Well, I learned how to share the gospel when I went on that mission trip. Well, now share the gospel here. Did you ever think of volunteering in VBS? I was equipped to do it. And so I think the reason sometimes this is undervalued is because the Venn diagram does overlap, right? But I do think rather than always thinking, okay, how can I add an equipped time? Like our conference we have is called Equipped. It came out of, you know, I got sick of the kids telling me, you know, Pastor Kyle, you don't go deep enough for me. So I said, you can come to this one thing. It's going to be an hour and a half, but it's going to be deep. Don't come if you don't want to learn. And that was equipping, right? But sometimes the establish and equipping can have some overlap that's hard to see, but it is wise for youth pastors to come back and think, am I just giving information or am I putting tools in their hands that they can use? So you can equip them how to read the Bible. You can equip them how to have conversations with people who believe things other than them. You can equip, like the list could go on and on, but it's kind of like, the image. You ever play baseball? I don't think we ever. We've had
a lot of conversations. We talked a lot about sports.
I played baseball. Did you play baseball as a kid?
I did, but it wasn't positive memories in my mind.
So baseball would be. If I'm equipping someone to play baseball, I'm getting them a glove. I'm making sure the glove is on the right hand, right hand or left hand, based on which one to throw. I'm giving them a bat. I'm giving them a ball. Like the equipping is not playing the game, but it's getting them what. I mean, that's where the word equipment comes from. I think, right? Like, so similarly, in middle school ministry, what does it look like to equip students? Well, it looks like having conversations that are going to train their mind, not just what to think, but learn how to think. What does it look like for a high school girl to be equipped? To realize, you know what? I like to sing. So I can be equipped to be on the praise band, but this isn't a performance. Now let's read a book together. There's good short books on corporate worship, on singing, on, you know, you can find them at Google them, whatever. Make sure they're biblical. But with that, not just to put on a performance, but actually be equipped to realize what's happening when I'm leading worship. What's happening? Like, and so all of this is just going, and we're realizing what we're doing here is just a classic, not giving a man a fish, but teaching a man to fish. A lot of that comes here in this equipping, because what we're doing is, some of this doesn't come naturally.
Right. On one side, I feel like we could ask, wait, is there ever a time where it's too early that we're in this circle, right? We think, well, how long should we be in established before we're ever being equipped? But in some sense, all Christians, what it means to be a Christian is to make disciples who make disciples, right? There's already a left-looking lean to being a Christian, regardless.
Correct.
However, there's another line, and this I'm going to throw back at you as another question of like, is there ever a spot? So if we're talking about, it's one thing to share the gospel and talk about our faith and talk about Christ in our life.
Yes.
But then you bring in leadership and leading other Christians, leading in large group areas or spaces that maybe have more ears, more attention, more opportunities to mislead.
Yep.
With that in mind, is there ever a spot that's maybe you push someone into that equipping too early, or a spot that, hey, maybe they need some other things established first before they're in these left-looking areas? Or is that just a different category altogether?
I think it's wise to make sure that, especially in youth ministry, if we're thinking of teaching the next generation the good news of Jesus Christ, the greatest news in all the world, we want to do it in a way that's clear and that is biblical, right? That's what we want. And so we realize that sometimes people are going to say things that they wish they didn't say, or they're going to communicate in ways that maybe isn't what they want. So we realize that like perfection is not possible apart from Christ, right? Yeah. But we do want to make sure that those we put in leadership roles have been formed enough. That is why, and that's like even... we're not talking about elders, but that's why here, 1 Timothy, right? Not a recent convert, right? So I do think we need to be cautious, but I don't know that means that the teaching of equipping or the training of equipping needs to wait necessarily till a certain marker point. That's more the outworking of what the public ministry looks like. For instance, if someone becomes a Christian today, a kid comes to my youth group tonight, and if we had youth group and they become a Christian tonight, it probably wouldn't be wise. Actually, let me take that back. It would not be wise to say, you know what? Tomorrow night we have middle school youth group. Why don't you come be a middle school youth leader? Right. And it would be like, well, that's not wise because you just became a Christian today. But what would be fine is that kid gets saved. Now we have a training class that is explaining how to reach your friends for Christ. And this kid goes, you know what? I want to join that class. I'm like, well, you know what? You're probably not positioned well in the sense of that you just became a Christian, so this is all new to you. But you know what? You have a lot of friends who aren't Christians, so why don't you come to the class and be equipped and go reach them with the gospel, right? And so just quickly, two ways to look at it. First, with students, I think that we can always be equipping them. We just need to think through, what does equipping look like for each stage? We had a video we showed about our family ministry guide, and you said about no kid comes with a manual. And in that, we think about, because kids don't come with manuals, we try to know them the best we can and equip them at an age, I'll use the word age-sensitive way. But then when we think of leaders, we want to make sure that we're not undervaluing equipping our leaders. And there's just simple ways that we can equip leaders that I think we often overlook, such as find some really good books that are short and easy to read on theology. The 9-mark set on building healthy churches, there's one on conversion, there's one on discipleship, there's one on building an evangelistic culture by Max Stiles. Just buying them and being like, hey, leaders, if you'll read these, I'd love to give you a free copy. Now, what would be better is read it with them and discuss it, but just getting it in their hand is real easy. Giving them heads up on what you're actually going to be teaching and why you're teaching it. That doesn't sound like equipping, but that's giving them the equipment so that when they're playing the game being youth group and leading a small group discussion, they're not like, oh, I thought Pastor Kyle was in a series on Psalm 23 and here he is talking about dating. It's like, oh, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And so with it, I think a lot of this comes down to communication.
And so as you equip them, as you empower them,
Yep.
they're looking left. And so ideally, all of your leaders are here. You started
Yep.
mentioning establishing leaders and equipping them. You want them to be here to look left, because that's what you're doing with them.
That's correct. You're
Adults
taking
or
them to the
student
left.
leaders,
Yep.
yeah, and helping take you to the left. That's all the E's.
Yeah, and so
Full circle.
I think I just had a light bulb moment in
all the shapes.
Yeah, I had a light bulb moment here. I think it comes down to how we communicate the greatest news in the world. First, we have to engage them. We have to actually, and you might not know them all, but like be with them, right? Again, proximity, not into the church necessarily, but just in general.
Yep.
But then how are you going to communicate the gospel in evangelism?
Yep.
How are you going to communicate the gospel in established? How are you going to communicate the gospel or in the Bible in equipping? Like, I'm not going to read a thick systematic theology book with a student at an outreach event.
Yep.
But I did read a thick systematic theology book with a high school student who I was both establishing and equipping, because I was like, you know what? You have a mind, you can handle this, you have the time. So now I'm going to equip you. Read so many books with him. Now he's got the books. He's got the knowledge. He knows if you want someone to pay attention in a book study, buy them whatever they want at Panera. Like he knows it. Like, even he'd always get instead of the sour cream, the cream cheese,
You get the add-on,
that's the fancy one. And I'm like, okay. But he knows how to do that.
Right.
And so again, it's just, how are you going to communicate, and let's communicate well. And so let's think about landing this. Sai, I'll give you one and me one for our listeners and those who are watching. They're like, okay, like I would say either buy the book Youth Ministry in the Vine, or buy Trellis in the Vine, or the Vine Project, which kind of is like, that's like, my book is like the outworking of that. Buy one of those, start thinking through this.
Yeah.
But what would be one question that you would say those who are watching or listening could maybe take away to further apply this? Because there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And at the end of the chapter in the book, I have some questions they can discuss with the youth leaders or with each other. But what would be one takeaway that you would give here as we land this plane?
Yeah, I mean, you've already been challenging them to think about who, looking at, hey, who are your people? Where are they at?
Yep.
I would maybe add to that the what.
Okay.
The what of what gaps do you notice in what your ministry is doing right now?
Yeah.
Between evangelize, engaging, all of it, right? It's so easy to fall into a natural spot and rut ourselves in a spot, or we just even hopefully as a church, we're naturally building people up as youth workers in established. That's hopefully something we're naturally going to be doing already.
Yes.
So to think the other ways and think, hey, am I establishing and am I equipping them to go over, or do I need to work on these other two areas? So what gaps do I have? That was something I thought of coming in. I was like, I'm already naturally thinking of some of these things, but where are my gaps?
Yeah.
And what am I thinking of there? What would you help? Do you think the youth worth listening? What question would you ask them? How can they process through this a little bit more?
Yeah, I would just take what you said, and I would just suggest to go a layer deeper. And what I would say is just take a piece of paper out, write engage, evangelize, establish, equip across the top. And then I would do two things. I would first write the different programs you have, and Sunday school, midweek youth ministry, school Bible studies, theology book reading groups, vacation Bible school, summer camp, all these things. And I would put them, what is the target? Like, what do we want? Do we want summer camp to be evangelistic, or do we want it to be established? Well, probably both. We'll put it in the middle. Do we want this fifth quarter type event that we do after the football games for a public high school? Do we want that? Like, no, that's for engagement and evangelize. So I would just map those out. But then I would also, take off the head for a second and say, I'm not the judge. Only God knows the human heart. But I would try to put kids on the paper too, to say, is this kid equipped or is this kid established? Why am I trying to equip a kid who the parents tell me they're not actually Christians, right? Like, and so again, I think that can go bad if you start calling balls and strikes and I'm the umpire and then now like this, but I just think sometimes visually writing that down. So again, engagement on the left and then evangelize. And then you draw a straight line down. That's the difference. Once they become Christians, then establishment and equip. And as this works, then you're sending them back to the left. And yeah, I think there's nothing better than serving Jesus. And I think there's also nothing harder than serving Jesus, because what this episode has reminded me is people are all different, and it means there's no silver bullet.
And that's what I think a final thing for me is the why.
Yep.
Just as an encouragement and something that when I'm struggling with, whether it's an Engage event or a student that I wish was more equipped, and thinking of the why. Why am I doing this? And it's probably all some level of similarity of whether it's faithfulness to Christ, being good stewards of the students that God gives us. Whatever that why core is to remember that when we're in those difficult spots of trying to deal with too many crazy middle schoolers or trying to deal with a stagnant teen that's just like, man, I wish you were further along. But to remember the why behind all of it keeps us, as we pursue these who's, helps keep us on track.
That's right.
From getting into a production mindset that's not what we're going for, but keeps us focused on the who.
Yeah, because the goal is not to produce a program. The goal is to present kids mature in Christ.
And building it around a people.
Yes.
That's the goal, and that helps us stay there.
And man, teenagers, what a better way to spend our time. Like, this is what we're doing. Well, Si, thanks for joining me today. To those who are listening and watching, I do want to remind you that if you have questions or if you'd like some coaching in this specific topic, you can send me an email, Kyle@youthministryinthevine.com. Also, as you listen to this episode or watch this episode, if you think it'd be helpful for you to send to your youth volunteers, that's part of the heartbeat behind this. We want to create resources that you can then use to train your volunteers. Or maybe you have friends who are youth pastors, or you're watching this and you don't serve in youth ministry, but you go to a church where someone either serves as a youth pastor or volunteered or was voluntold to lead the youth ministry. Please send this to them. The heartbeat behind this is we want this to be an equipping thing where they can be equipped to faithfully serve. Again, the heartbeat behind this podcast episode and every podcast episode we do is we want to equip youth pastors and youth leaders to build biblical, sustainable, and contextual youth ministry. And we think one way we do that is by thinking specifically about who the students are that we're ministering to, and then building the programs around the people. Thanks so much for listening and watching. We'll be with you next time.